Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Sam.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I just finished a full day of gem buying, so I am exhausted. I've got
Awesome.
rosé. I'm at a customer's house by her pool,
Oh, it doesn't get better than that.
living the life today.
I'm so jealous.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I just ate some pizza, and that's the highlight of my. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it would be my highlight of my day. That sounds great. Fantastic. Treat yourself all day, every day.
Oh, yeah. Friday nights are all about pizza, so.
Awesome. Folks in the comments, let us know if Sarah and I are louder. We will adjust it. We don't want to blow anyone's eardrums out. But today we've got a fun class because Sarah's going to teach us the 101 of using a jewel loom, which is actually a Beadalon product. So Sarah has used this quite a bit with her. I mean, you go way back with Beadalon.
Oh, yeah. And
So,
and actually the jewel loom was one of the very first Beadalon products that I got to play with. So yeah, this is it's very nostalgic for me to be able to do a project with it. So I'm excited.
yeah, I feel like you just have a whole lot of expertise around it. So I'm very excited. I've never loomed before, so I'm very excited just to finally see how the heck it comes together.
Yeah.
And we get to see Sarah feature some of our new beads in the shop. Sarah,
some really pretty ones.
I sent over Sarah one of our grab bags, our 6mm grab bags of Czech fire polish. And I think she took the challenge, is going to use them with the loom today. So yes. I know lots of folks from my community might probably have these 6mm rounds. So you probably don't have that many supplies you would need to be able to do this project. The loom is not an expensive tool. You can get it pretty much anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then I'll let you cover the rest of the supply list, but it's not too much as far as I can tell.
No, not at all. And it takes very little to create something really amazing. And it's not hard. I can't wait for everybody to see it. For people who have never seen it before, they're going to be blown away at how easy it is. So that's exciting.
Yeah. So let's jump in if you're ready.
Yes. Yay! All right. So before I turn everybody around, I am going to familiarize you with what the loom looks like and kind of the ins and outs of this little guy. Because it is very small and it's flat for the most part. There are ridges on each end, but it is it's made to grip in your hand. That's why it's shaped the way that it is, so that you can hold on to it. It's very, very lightweight. Now, I want to say this and be sure that everybody hears me, and I'll say it louder for everybody in the back. It's flexible, but not bendable. Don't bend it because it will snap, but you do have to flex it, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Just don't get crazy, because you'll end up snapping it in half, and that does happen. So I just want to make sure that I drive that point home. Flexible,
Sarah's saving the looms.
Bendable, no. Okay. So when you get your loom, it comes in just two pieces. Basically, that's all there is to it. It's this piece right here, and then it comes with a rod, and the rod has these two little hooked end pieces, and this is the part that's going to go into the actual loom here, into these little holes. There's a hole here and a hole at the bottom. That's what's going to create the tension that you're going to need to hold your design, because obviously you can't loom on this if it's flat. You need to be able to get in underneath your work, and having this rod inserted is what you're going to do. So I'm going to show you this part first, and then I'll turn you around because it's a little bit tricky. Yeah. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take one of your little hook pieces, okay? And I like to take it and push it up against my body, which I don't know if you can see or not, but I push it up against I push it up against my body, put one of the hooks in the bottom closest to me, okay? And then flex it, just kind of pushing against my body, and snap that other end in. And that's all it takes. If you use your body as the weight to flex it, whether it's like up here, or if you use your belly or whatever, you use less force than you would if you were like manhandling it with two hands. Most people will break it that way. So if you use your body, you can kind of feel how much pressure you're using, because it doesn't take much to get that nice shape. So this is exactly what we want. Okay. And now I'm going to turn us around so we can get to it. Let's look at these beads. I can't wait to show you the beads I picked out.
Yeah, we sent you like a mix of colors, so I'm very curious which ones you're using.
Yeah, I picked out the fall colors because I just couldn't resist. Look how pretty. And
oh my goodness.
you can make a pattern, but I'm going to leave mine in straight rows like this just because it's so pretty. When I laid it out, I was like, yep, just made my bracelet. It's ready to go. So.
Oh, that's a lovely combo. It's very warm and fall feeling.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Love it. So speaking of beads, all right, Sam has so graciously sent me these 6mm check glass beads. But that's not the only thing you can use on your loom. I think when a lot of people think about the loom, they think about seed beads. And though that is probably the most popular bead that is used on the loom, it's not the only bead you can use. And that's what makes it so cool. For people who don't particularly like seed beads, it doesn't mean you can't loom. I'm not using a single seed bead in this entire project. It's all check glass beads. You can use different shapes. You can use different sizes. You can use beads that have 2 holes. You can use just about anything that you can imagine on the loom. And the same is said for your stringing materials as well. So I'm going to create the warps. We'll talk about that in just a second, but I'm going to actually create my warps with some hemp. So I'll be using a combination of hemp cord. This is 10-pound hemp. You use any color that you want to. I'm going to use that to go back and forth to create the warps. And then what's going to hold my beads in place, I'm going to be using some bead weaving thread. I'm using Wildfire and I'm using gray. But that's just the combination that I chose for this. You can literally use anything. You can use leather. That's one of my favorite things to use on the loom is some really beautiful leather cord. You can use
I like that idea a lot.
Cotton cord, nylon cord, literally anything. You can use ribbons. We've done this with ribbons. We've done it with, let's see, bungee cord, which is really kind of weird because it makes a stretch bracelet, which is kind of cool. But
That's
the sky is the limit.
What?
It's possible.
Bungee cord?
Yep. You can use anything. And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that because when they look at the grooves here, they think, okay, well, my cording has to fit in the grooves. And that's not necessarily true either. The cord that you use can just as easily sit up on top of the grooves. So don't feel like you have to use something that's small enough because I can show you the hemp that I'm using. It's a little bigger than the grooves. I mean, it sits there nicely, but it's not down inside. So using larger things to create your warps and your wefts with is totally possible. You use anything you want to. The other thing I'm going to be needing is a needle. Now I'm using a jewel loom needle. That's a special needle that is the same length as the width of the jewel loom, but you can use just a regular beading needle, size 10, size 11, whatever you're comfortable with that's going to fit with your beads and your thread. But I like the long needle because it kind of just saves some time. You can grab these anywhere you can get a jewel loom. A lot of times places will have them hanging side by side so you can get the needles and the looms, but
oh, nice.
You can use just regular needles if you want to. All right. The other thing that I'm going to use is a button. And I just grabbed a button out of my stash. It's just a wooden button. It has 2 holes on. You can literally use any kind of button you want to. I'm not going to mess with hardware or anything like that. We're going to keep it super, super simple. And we're just going to use a button with our hemp. And it's going to be easy to put on and lightweight.
So
okay.
You could use like a standard type button also, like even like a check glass button for this type of
Yes, the check glass buttons would be beautiful.
Ooh,
with
yay,
this.
because I've been trying to get more of those for the shop. We had a batch recently. I'm getting more. Like I think those would be so beautiful as like
oh yeah,
a really detailed
yeah, that'd be the perfect touch. It'd be so pretty. All right, so let's talk about this is all 101. So for those of you who know about the loom, this is a refresher, but for those of you who know nothing, I'm going to give you the down and dirty. Okay, we're doing start to finish here. So let's talk about the cord that comes. Let's see. I'm looking to see if I had a bracelet here to show you. I don't, unfortunately. But we're going to create what are called warps, and the warp cord, or the whatever thread or material you're using, are the threads that are going to run up and down the length of the loom. So if I refer to the warp, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm going to be using the hemp for. The back and forth movement, where you are using your needle and your thread, those threads that go back and forth from left to right instead of up and down, those are called wefts. Wefts. And because I have such a thick Southern accent, a lot of people don't catch that. It's weft, W-E-F-T-S, weft. So
that's
you got
a lot of consonants.
Yeah, you got a warp and a weft. So that's just the terminology that's used here. Okay. So we're going to warp the loom, meaning we're going to create those warp threads. So I'm going to take my hemp, and I don't have a measurement for this. And the reason is because I like to work off of the spool. Depending on what kind of material you're using, the measurements are always going to be a little bit different. So it's not something that you have like a set measurement for. But you do want to find the end of your cord, which I have not found on this piece. Let's see. Uh-oh.
So Sarah's grabbed some 10-pound hemp cord here, which is a nice standard size. It's one I've carried some of that before. I love the color combo you have there of those neutral browns.
Yeah, I really like the browns. Not that I don't like just regular standard hemp, but I love to be able to use colors to add even more kind of texture, and it just kind of adds a little something different, because you could use like pops of color. You're actually going to see it, so you can choose whatever colors you want to. Okay, so to attach this, we're going to flip our loom over to the back, and there is a button back here. There's a button on this side, and there's a button on this side. Okay, I've had this loom forever, so you can see mine's pretty worn out where I have marked it up. But the two buttons, that's how you attach your cord. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our hemp, and we are going to tie a knot around our button. Okay, so just an overhanded knot, if I can get a hold of it here. Okay, you just want to tie an overhanded knot, tie that onto your button. Be careful not to catch that part of your rod that's sticking out the back here. Okay.
Is it pointy at all? Is it smooth? They smooth it out?
What do you mean?
Like, how pokey is that thing?
It's pretty pokey. I mean, it's not like going to cut you, but you just don't want to attach your cord to it accidentally, like wrap around it. So just be sure that you don't. And we're going to take the rod out so it doesn't stay. I'll show you. So I'm going to tie some more knots just because I like to be sure that it's nice and tight on here. And you can wrap it around a couple times if you want to. It's just, more than anything, it's just about making sure that it's secure and it's not going to come undone, because you're going to be putting a lot of tension on this knot back here. So tie it on there really, really secure. Give it the tug test. And you also want to pull. Notice when I pulled so that my knot is up here towards my work. Don't let your knot be down here. If your knot is back here, pull real hard and it'll bring your knot up here. Because if you don't and it slips, you'll lose some of the tension in your warps. All of that'll make sense as we go though. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my warp thread and I'm going to turn my loom over, and I'm going to pick a spot, any of the little notches here, and I'm going to lay my hemp into that spot. It doesn't matter where. You can start over here on the end if you because I'm going to knock those into the floor, and that would not be good. All right, so
you might have lost connection for a moment. So just when you were talking about, you put your first notch in. I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything important.
Right. Okay. So we're just going to put it into the first notch, and then you want to pull tight. You don't want to pull like crazy tight. You want to keep even tension and you want to bring it down here to the other end of the loom and find a corresponding notch. Now, it doesn't have to be exact. You don't have to count. If it's off by 1 or 2, that's fine. But just eyeball it. More importantly, you don't want to like do it like this or, anything like that. Just get it as close as you can, okay? And put it into that notch. Then you want to turn the loom over to that button that's on the back. You want to take your cord and wrap around the button, and then you're going to need to come back up to the front of the loom, and then you're going to put it in a notch and come up here. Now, I haven't measured yet, okay? So I've got to measure. So I was just kind of showing you, but I'm gonna do some actual measuring here in just a second. I need to be sure that my spacing between my warps, which are these 2 threads, is big enough to accommodate the largest bead that I'm using in my design. So since all of the beads that I'm using are 6mm beads, I need to have a space between the warps that's big enough to accommodate that bead. So this warp area is a little bit too big. I was just kind of eyeballing it. So basically, I want to come over, let's see, and close up that space. So I'm kind of just guessing and then laying my beads in there just to see, like, there's 1, 2, 3 notches in between.
Yeah,
that's pretty snug. I'm gonna go over one more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's see if it'll fit in there. I think 4 is better. So I'm going to go back to 4. But before I do that, before I lock all this into place, I need to come back down here to the bottom and make sure that it is in the right place as well. So I need to be sure. All this has to happen while you're holding the tension on all of your cording, which can be a little tricky at first, but it just takes a little bit of practice. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're putting it in the 4th notch, right? Guide it all the way up here to the top. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Come back around to the back. Wrap around your button just once, and then back up here to the front. So flip it back over. And
so those buttons become the anchor point for basically every strand, every warp. Ah, did I get that?
That's right. Yep, you got it. Okay, so now 4 over with our hemp, and we want 1 more warp thread than how many beads across you want your bracelet to be. So our bracelet is going to be 5 beads across, which means we need 6 of these warp threads because the beads fit in between, right? They're going to fit in these little lanes that we're creating. Keep your tension nice and tight. Don't let go as you're going here. 1, 2, whoops, sorry, you can't see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Around to the back, around that button, back up here to the front. Make sure 1, 2, 3, 4. I gotta undo my hemp here on the card. Sorry.
More hemp, more hemp.
Get it unraveled here. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my tension. Oh my gosh, what a mess. It turned into a big tangle. All right, hold on. Okay. Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
I'm muted. I'm muted. I keep doing that. I'm trying not to give extra sound to distract, but see, this is what happened. I was asking if anyone's having an extra good Friday or if they're extra excited for the weekend that we're about to start.
Yes, yes, yes.
How about you?
I am so ready for the weekend. Look at this mess I have. It didn't come off of the card very nicely. It's not playing nice tonight. So I'm just kind of like ripping it off the card so I can move on. Come on, hemp. Okay. And all this while I'm still holding all of them tight.
Like guitar strings? Like how tight?
That's how tight. That's how tight. All right. So wrapping back around. Oh, in the wrong lane here. Okay. Back around and up the front into the 4th. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Went all the way down here. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the bottom. Wrap around that button, back up to the top. Okay, all the way down again. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we've got 6 warps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So we've got enough lanes for 5 rows of beads. Okay. So now we're ready to tie this and make it nice and tight and secure so I can let go. So I'm going to bring it all back here to the back, even with my big mess of hemp here. Oh my gosh, what a disaster. Just keeping it real, you know.
This is what I was telling you about my chain monster, Sarah. This is it.
Yeah.
So I could have my chain monster, but you're always going to have this hemp monster.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So fortunately, I was able to trim off. Okay. Now still keeping everything nice and tight. Don't lose any of that tension. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to secure this onto this button back here. So I'm going to wrap around the button a couple of times with my hemp, just kind of ignoring the tail that's already there. I'm okay with that. It makes no difference. Okay. Now I'm going to actually take my cord end. I'm going to go underneath all of these warps that are back here, just like this. And I'm going to tie almost like a half hitch knot, if you will, around all of those cords. So you can see how I'm kind of looping around, and then I'm going to stick the end of my cord through there, pull it tight, and then pull it down here up against the button. Now, you don't have to do that. That's just one of the knots that I find to be really secure. However you can get this secure is what I want you to do. Don't feel like you have to follow the exact steps that I'm doing or anything like that. It's totally just about making it tight and secure. There's no real wrong or right with that. But I do want to be sure that I get a couple of really good secure knots and tighten it down. All right, now I'm going to turn it back over and we're ready to go. But we got to remove the rod. Removing the rod is going to make the plastic of the loom expand. And that's going to give even more tension on these cords because you want these to be super tight, just like guitar strings. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the end of the loom again up against my body. I hold my fingers over the warps to just keep them from hopping out of their little spots. And then very carefully remove the rod. And we're done. Now they're even tighter than they were before. So make sure you take that rod out and you can see now the rod or the loom itself is flexed to maximum capacity here. And we're ready to go. Now, I know this part takes a minute. I know that a lot of times people struggle with this part. And the answer to that is just patience and practice. There's really no like magic, way to make it work. You just have to do it a few times. You'll feel you'll feel how much tension you need to use. And the tension will be different with whatever stringing material you're using. But just practice, because once you get this part down, the rest of it is smooth sailing. It's really super easy. So don't get discouraged by this part.
So this is where you play us a song, right, Sarah?
Yeah. Okay, so the loom is ready to go. Now we're ready to get our needle and thread ready. So with the needle and thread, I like to give myself like a wingspan and a half. I don't do regular like inches or centimeters measurements. I just like to give myself like a good amount of the bead stringing, or I'm sorry, the bead weaving thread to work with. And a wingspan will do. I find the end of it though. Otherwise we're going to be in the same mess we were with the hemp. All right, come on now. Okay. So I'm going to get a wingspan and a half, which is, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9, depending on how tall you are and how long your arms are, right? That's what the length of that's going to be. And you can always add more thread later if you need to. I'm coming back into the frame here just a second, I promise. I haven't gone away. I haven't gone away.
Sarah
Okay.
has left the class. I will now be telling you how to use the Jewel loom.
All right. So to thread my needle, I'm using Wildfire, which is one of my very favorite bead weaving threads for this. And part of the reason that I love it so much is that it's color fast. So some bead weaving threads are not, so the color will fade or bleed into your clothing or even your skin and kind of dye your skin a certain color. But this is color fast and it's thermally bonded, which gives it this really cool kind of sticky texture to it, which I know kind of sounds funny, but if you've ever needed to do bead weaving and you've needed to make a strong knot, you want your thread to be kind of sticky. So you don't have to precondition it or anything like that. It's already ready to go. I take it and I flatten it with my pliers right on the end. And now that it's nice and flat, I can very easily slide that into the eye of the needle. Maybe.
Good luck.
No pressure. No pressure. You know. All right. Come on now.
You got this, Sarah. You got this.
Oh my gosh. Golly. Are you trying to be all professional and just making a mess?
What happens when you burn the end of Wildfire?
So it you can use like a thread zapper on it.
Yeah.
And it will cut it. It will melt it. It does melt. So there, I got it. Yay. Okay.
Yes.
We're ready. Okay. Now the technique for using your loom, let's see if I can get you guys in a better angle here. At least brighter. Okay. So the technique for your loom is a little bit different, but even it makes no difference if you're right-handed or left-handed. You're always going to be working left to right. Okay. So doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed. Those of us who are right-handed, it means we have to make our left hand actually do something, which is kind of awkward until you get used to it. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to anchor our thread before we start adding any beads to this. So I'm going to take my needle and my thread. I'm going underneath the first warp and I'm towards the top here, not right up here. I do want to come down about an inch, inch and a half, something like that. Okay. I'm going underneath the first warp with my needle, over the second warp, under the third, over the fourth, under the fifth, and over the sixth. So basically I just kind of wove my needle, right? Over, under. And I'm going to pull my thread and I'm going to get up to about, I don't know, about 8 inches of a tail. You want to leave that behind. Okay. Now you want to take your needle and you want to go back the other direction. This time we're going on this outer warp. We're going under, over, under, over, under, over. This is called a tabby weave, and you really don't need to know that for any reason other than just to say that you know that that's what that is. That's just the technical term for it. Okay, so now basically what I've done is I've anchored my thread. So now I don't have to tie any knots. I don't have to do anything. I can start adding beads to this and don't have to worry that I'm going to pull my thread so hard that I'm going to pull it out, right? You just want to be sure that you don't pull your thread out. Okay, so we're ready to add beads. Super easy, super, super easy. I'm going to take my needle. Again, we're working left to right, okay? So depending on the pattern that you're going to use, pick up all of the beads in the pattern that you want here. So pick mine up and I'll show them to you. Okay, so I have all 5 of my beads on my needle. Okay, now I want to take my needle underneath all of the warps, all of them underneath. I'm going to kind of grab the beads and hold them. I'm going to take my right hand and I'm going to pull the needle out of the beads and pull out all of the length of the thread, still holding on to my beads. Okay, when I pull out all of that extra length, now I'm going to use my finger and I'm going to push those beads up in between the warp threads. And I'm just going to hold them there with my finger. So you just pop them into place, 1 bead per plane here, right? Now to secure those, we're going to take our needle and thread. Our thread, notice it's coming underneath, from underneath this outer warp. This time I want to take my needle back through all of those beads, but I want my needle and my thread to go over the top of those warps. So push the beads up, take your needle, make sure you're going over the top of this first warp. I like to think of it as like use my needle to scrape the inner ceiling of that bead. That's how I know I'm over the top of the warps, right? So kind of scraping the inside of that bead, running my needle back through all of them. And if I can see the metal of my needle over the top of the warp, I know that my needle and thread are over those warps. I can move my fingers away, pull out the slack, and that's it. Your beads are secure. You've basically just created like a little sandwich. So you've got your thread running underneath the warps and then your thread running over the warps, and your beads just kind of fall in between.
Delicious. Right? Looks great. So I like that you don't have to like weave up and down. You can just like go under. I mean, no, like for the first one you weaved it, but then for the top one you only had to go across the top. Yep. Nice.
So now we're just going to pick up the same pattern because that's what I want to stick with here. So I'm going to pick up the rest of my beads, or just another set of 5 rather. And it's kind of awkward because I'm like over here making my left hand pick up beads with a needle. And if you don't use your left hand a whole lot or vice versa or whatever, it's just kind of awkward. You get used to it. All right, so I have all of my beads on my needle. Take that needle from left to right underneath all of the warps, holding onto the beads. I'm going to pull out the needle, pull out all of the excess length of the thread, and then push the beads up, right up next to the beads previously. Okay. And then take my needle back through those beads over the top of the warps. And notice I keep my finger under there to kind of push those beads up. That helps to make sure you're over the top of the warps. Checking, I can see my needle in between each bead over the warp and pull. And your second row is secure. That's it. Like that's literally the entire technique to this. The hardest part of the entire thing is just setting it up. You know, that's the part that takes the longest. The rest of it, you kind of get into a groove with it. You start picking up your beads and, you know, you're paying attention, making sure that you're over those warps when you come back through with your needle. But even then, when you get used to it, it really just kind of becomes like, you know what it feels like. You know, you can recognize where that needle is inside those beads, so you'll know. And not only that, but if you don't and you accidentally miss one and you end up underneath the warps, the bead will fall out. It will tell you. You're not going to find out at the last minute when you go to put the bracelet on. You're definitely going to know. So just go back through and pull.
This design is really nice because it lets the light through of the beads really well.
Yeah.
So I just feel like it features the check glass really nicely because the light can kind of shine through it. And also, of course, the color combo you chose is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, you did send me good choices.
Well,
I didn't pick them out. You picked them out, and then I just picked.
I thought you were going to use the blues that I sent.
I was going to. That was my first thought was, ooh, I'm going to use these blues. But then I thought, you know, that's what everybody expects me to do. And you did. You expected me to use the blues. So I thought,
yeah, because you love blue.
All right, so the rest of this is just repetition. You're just going to be picking up your beads. And the cool part about it is that the bigger the beads, the faster this goes, right? Because it takes less beads to make a bracelet if they're nice and big. So we're going to work up the length of our bracelet, and a couple of things you need to take into consideration when you're thinking about how long you want your bracelet to be. So we're going to be including some knots, and we're going to be including a button. That's going to take up anywhere between 1.5 inches to 2 inches of length. So if you need like a 7-inch bracelet, you probably only want to do maybe 5 inches worth of beads on the loom, or, you know, adjust your math accordingly. Just be sure you give yourself that extra room. So don't make your bracelet on the loom a 7.5 inch and expect to have a 7.5 inch bracelet. You're going to end up with like a 9-inch bracelet, or similar.
Some folks need it. Like, I've got big wrists. But you find that the once you start tying things up and the button, it's ranges for about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in addition. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
And
I was worried that I didn't send you enough of each bead color, that you were going to run out too early.
Oh no, there's plenty here. And the cool thing about the loom is that we're making a bracelet, which seems to be probably the most popular, I guess, thing that you make on the loom. But I've taught classes where we made all kinds of things. We've made pendants that are really amazing. You can make rings really quickly. The rings are really fun. You can do rings with seed beads, or just like really, really small, like 2 and 3 millimeter beads to make rings with. You can... one of my favorite things to use on the jewel loom, believe it or not, is wire, like artistic wire.
Really?
Or German style wire. Yeah, it's great for making the warps.
Okay.
And then at the ends, I still use like the wildfire to attach my beads. But I attach all my beads, and then when I'm ready to take it off, then I can make wrapped loops with the ends of all my warps, right? I can add dangles to them. I can do all kinds of stuff with. So using hard wire on the loom is really cool.
Wow.
I'll have to grab my bucket
how does
here.
It wear? Does it kink up? Like, I'm curious how and because wire's not particularly flexible. So how do you find it wears?
Well, for a bracelet, it's going to wear about the same way that a bangle would, because it is going to have that extra structure to it. My favorite way when I'm doing like, if I'm using the wire, I like to make pendants and things like that more than bracelets, though it does make a cool bracelet. But again, it wears like a bangle. So you kind of have to be prepared for that, that kind of feeling to it.
What wire size do you use when you use an artistic wire on the loom?
So I like to use like 22 as the biggest, and then anything below that. I think if you're just starting out, 24 gauge wire is probably going to be your best beginner wire to use, just to get a feel for it, and because it fits in the grooves nicely. But anything bigger than about 22 gauge is really just kind of, it's just too bulky, you know. It doesn't look as good. At that point, the wire kind of takes over the design, and that's never really what that's not really ever what I want it to be. I want the beads to be the star. So you can see, you kind of get in the groove and it works up pretty quickly. Like this, we've got what, maybe 2 inches so far, and
yeah, we're making good time. It's also just really pretty to watch.
It is.
Like,
well, and that's why I was so excited to send it to you, because it becomes, not only is it pretty to watch, it's kind of therapeutic to watch, but it's also very kind of therapeutic to do, because you get in a groove, you know, you get into like this motion of the back and forth and the back and forth, the pop the beads in and back and forth. And it is one of those things where you can really just kind of settle your mind, you know, you can settle down and just kind of get in the groove with it. And you don't have to do any extra hard thinking, and it's just repetition. And I really like that, because the results are gorgeous, you know? Gosh, these beads look even better in the actual loom than they did laying on the
I was going to say, you've made those beads about twice as prettier as they were when they arrived to you.
It's really, really gorgeous.
Like, you somehow just made me fall in love with check glass all over again, because I'm seeing it in a new, like, literally a new way to use it, and it's very, like, I find that very exciting.
Yes. And you can use irregular beads for this too. You don't have to stick with just round. You can use cubes, you can use ovals, you can use anything. And the results are always so different. You know, it always has such a cool, different, unique look.
You're smart to have kept it simple today, of using just one color in each row.
Yeah.
But, like, obviously with seed beading, like, the patterns are endless.
Oh yeah. Well, even with these, and you can get, like, I used to grab like graph paper and some colored pencils and write, you know, or not write, but like design a little pattern and then transfer it over here, you know, to the loom. So lay it all out with your colored pencils and then use your beads to recreate it on the loom. And you can make any pattern that you want to. It's really cool.
I'm very curious, did you randomly pick the order of the colors, or how did you come to this exact order, Sarah, my dear Sarah?
It was completely random. In fact, I'm looking at it and I'm like, that wasn't the way that I originally had them laid out. But I like it just like it is. I had it laid out differently the first time, but
you have your warmest colors in the middle. You have your opaque as like a feature. You have your like neutral browns as your like side like border. It's like very meticulously done.
That was completely unintentional. All right, now there's something that is happening that I don't want to just ignore, because I feel like I would be doing our beginners in particular a disservice if I ignored this and just decided, you know what, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to cut it off short. I'm running out of thread, and that can be a challenge. So I'm gonna just deal with it and show you how to deal with it so that you know how, right? I don't want to leave anything out. So I'm going to go through this row and come out the other side here. Okay. Now I still have what looks like plenty of thread, right? It looks like I've got about 12 inches of thread. That's running. I'm going to do one more row. That's running a little short because I need to have enough to tie off and then start a new thread. So I'm going to show you how to do that so we can actually finish this bracelet, because it's going to be beautiful and we're almost done. All right, so one last row, and then I'm going to get some new thread. So taking the wire, or the thread rather, and my needle back through. Now, I need to secure this thread before I can cut it off. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull through. Okay, now I'm going to take this needle and thread and I'm going to push these beads down, and I'm actually going to go underneath this time. And I'm going underneath the warps. It's a little tricky, but you can just kind of push the beads down to go underneath again and come out over here on the other side. So I'm just reinforcing where I'm going to cut off. So I've thread through all of those beads. Okay. I'm going to take my needle and thread and I'm going to tie a half hitch knot on this outer warp. So I'm just looping my thread around to make a little loop. Okay. I'm going to take my needle, go through and pull. And then I'm going to go back through the beads another time over the top of the warps and back out. Okay, now I know that thread is secure. I can trim this off at this point and nothing's going to happen, and I can start with a new thread. So I'm going to come in, trim, okay, and take my needle and thread and grab myself a new piece of thread. And then
started again.
Yeah,
so look at that.
we're going to start a couple of rows back, actually, just to anchor. So I'm just going to take my needle and thread through there a couple of times. Okay. So I see a question. I've not been able to see the comments going by, but I see a question that says, do all the beads need to be the same size? And the answer to that is absolutely not. They do not need to all be the same size. That's the cool part about this. So I don't know if you remember when I was creating the warps, and I meant to mention it then, that you want to create the warp spacing to accommodate the largest bead that you are using in your design. Meaning, let's say, for instance, our 6 millimeter, I'm going to go ahead and get my thread going so I can talk and work at the same time. I'm going to just take it. I've gone back a couple of rows, just taking my needle and thread through there. And I'm going to leave myself a tail. I'm just going to pass through these beads just like I would if I were adding beads, right? I'm just going back and forth to get up here to where I was. But let's say, for instance, that our bracelet, the biggest bead in our bracelet is going to be a 6 millimeter bead, right? And we know how much room the 6 millimeter bead takes up in the warp area. Well, in that same amount of warp area, I can also fit maybe 2 3 millimeter check glass beads, or I don't know, 4 seed beads, or I don't know, whatever will fit in there. So in other words, you can put more than one bead in the warp row. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's so, but if you wanted to have your rows be different widths, could you just start off with different widths when you were warping?
You can, but you gotta have your pattern, like, you gotta have it all planned out ahead of time, so you know. It's kind of hard to explain. Yeah, you have to remember though that it's going to affect the entire row all the way down this direction. So if this row, if we're creating a warp here that's going to accommodate a size 6 millimeter bead, but the next warp that we create, we want it to accommodate a 10 millimeter bead in the pattern, that's fine. But you have to use that 10 millimeter space. You're going to have to fill that up and use that in your design all the way down, right? Does that make...
Oh, totally. So, but you can't, this does still work with varying widths between the warp.
Yep. Yeah. And here in a second, I'll go get my, my box of, I've got a box of just jewel loom designs. I'll show them to you so you can see like all of the things that are possible. Okay. Real quick. Let's take a little measurement here. So I think we're pretty close to having enough to make a bracelet, but I just want to be sure. All right. So we're right at 4 inches. I'm going to do, let's see, about 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do about 5 more rows, and then we're going to call it done, and I'll show you how to finish this. So let me work those up real quick, and I'll show you how to finish the ends. Oh, no. Really? I put all of those on and they just fell right back off. It is definitely a Friday night. All right. So now I'm just picking up where I left off. I have a new thread going, and I'm just going to keep going like I was. Okay. Put those beads in place and take that needle back through. Cool. And I'm keeping really good tension on the beads as well, so that when I pull the thread, there are not any spaces between the thread and the warps. You can see it's nice and tight. You don't want there to be any loops that are hanging off the edge of your warps, in other words.
Do you tend to try to match your warps to your beading thread?
It kind of depends on the project. For this one, I tried to get as close as I could. I'm kind of limited because Wildfire doesn't come in a ton of colors, but I wanted it to be as invisible as possible. So that's why I went with the gray, with this kind of khaki colored, kind of green brown hemp color. But it depends, because sometimes I want that color to pop. So if I'm using like hemp that's, you know, maybe I'm using like electric blue and I want my thread to be purple, you know, and then my beads are hot pink. Like you can, all of that adds just different dimension and texture to your design. So you can decide, well, do I want my threads to be part of it, or do I want those to just kind of disappear into the background?
Yeah. I want a hot pink bracelet. Thank you.
You got it. You got it.
I'll go find the beads.
All right, let's do 2 more rows and then we'll finish this. Because finishing it off, there are so many different techniques with finishing. There are certain findings you can buy. There are certain weaving techniques you can do, but I'm going to keep this as simple as possible because some things just don't need to be hard.
That sounds like a perfect choice.
And I have so many people in my life that are like, you know what? I have this design that's been sitting on my loom for 2 years and I haven't taken it off because I don't know how to finish it. So that tends to be a problem with people and looming, like finishing it off. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And there's so many different techniques to choose from, but seriously, like, what is it? Ockman's razor, the most obvious answer. The simplest thing is the most obvious answer, or something like that. I don't know. You're the smart one here. You tell me. But
oh, I know.
It's like,
so you're talking about Occam's razor, where the simplest answer is always the correct is the correct answer.
Yes, exactly. Keep it simple. Don't overthink it.
Do you say keep it stupid simple, or do you say keep it simple stupid?
Oh, it kind of depends on my mood, I guess. All right, I'm going to call this done. Now, basically what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing where we tied off our thread up here where we needed to add more thread. We're going to do the same thing down here on the bottom. So my needle and my thread is exiting out here on the left. We're over the top of the warp. I'm going to go back through all of these beads, but I want to push all my beads down and go into the beads and go underneath the warp. So just reinforcing this row and getting ready to tie off. Okay. Just really want to make sure that you reinforce your first row and your last row. And then everything else should be pretty secure. So I'm going to do another 1/2 inch knot just around this outer warp. So I'm just pulling my thread to make a little loop and taking my needle through it. Pull that tight. Take my needle and thread back through. And I may go up 1 more row. Just for even more security. So I'm just going to jump up a row. And I'm going to cut my thread off. Okay, just be careful not to cut your warp. Trimming that off. All right, I'm going to take my needle because I'm going to need that here in just a second. I can also come here where we've added our thread and I can trim that off. Okay, back up here to the top. This thread that we anchored, I'm going to pull it out. Okay. I'm going to put my needle on the end of this, and I'm just going to repeat that same process, just reinforcing this very first row. Okay, so just taking that tail with my needle. You can go over or under, it makes no difference really. You just want to thread that in, do a nice little half hitch knot, back through. It is kind of snug, so you do kind of have to, you might have to wiggle your beads a little bit.
Right, because this is, you've passed through these beads multiple times, and obviously the hole in the bead is only so large.
Right. All right, so that's nice and secure. I'm going to come over here and trim that off. Okay. Okay, now we're ready to take it off of the loom. And this is the part that most people, gives people the most anxiety, because I feel like they feel like as soon as they take it off the loom, it's going to fall apart. It's not, I promise. It's nice and secure. Those beads are not going to go anywhere. Look how beautiful that is. Oh my gosh. That is so pretty.
Stunning. It's stunning.
All right, so I'm going to come to the back. And I'm going to hold on to it because there's tension involved here. So when I snap this, when I cut this off, the loom is going to snap. So I'm going to hold on to the work, and I'm going to cut these threads. And that popped. And then down here on the bottom, those you don't have to cut because they're just well, they're not one continuous loop, but they're 3 loops. Okay, so now it's off. Look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Gosh, that's so pretty.
My wrist size is 7.5 inches.
Okay, so now we have to finish this off. And we have all of these threads. We don't really know what to do with them, but I'm going to show you quick and easy. So I'm going to cut these that are a loop just like that. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take we've got 3 sets, right, of 2. And I'm going to tie them to each other. So let's see. How do I like to do it? I like to do it this way. You can do just an overhanded knot if you want to. I kind of like to do it like this. So I'm taking the first and second warp thread and just tying them together, tying a little knot. Okay. Now I'm going to take the second and third, or I'm sorry, the third and fourth warp thread. I'm going to do the same thing.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Being so clever. Okay.
Right. And I like my knot to be pretty close down here. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Oh my gosh. Come on. This hemp is it's a little stiff. It's not wanting to knot very well.
Maybe it's because you were so mean to it.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's definitely why.
Could you use a tweezer at this point to with those sorts of knots?
Yeah, for sure. Or a beading awl, whatever you wanted to use, right? Okay. So I've secured my beads. Now they're not going to go anywhere, right? They're not going to slide around. That's not my favorite knot in the world, but it'll do. Okay. Now I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to bundle them together. Tie another overhanded knot. Now, again, there are so many different ways you can do this. I'm just doing like the easy peasy. Okay. So tying those into a knot. Okay. Then let's see, I've got 3 and 3 and I'm going to leave that like that for just a second. Okay. Just for a second. And if you don't like this finishing technique, there's, like I said, there's a million others. I'm going to repeat what I just did. So I got to tie these real quick. We're going to put a button on one end. Okay. Oops. So you asked about Halloween movies a while back.
You sure
said
did. I love that you're still
you're-
thinking about this.
So have you watched any?
I started with The Corpse Bride, Tim
Yeah.
Burton. I really enjoyed it. I thought it got really
So
good by the
good.
end. I really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah.
Tonight I'm gonna do Sweeney Todd since I've only seen like live productions of it. So I'm gonna
Oh
watch
my gosh.
Johnny Depp version tonight.
Yes.
So I'm excited. I think that's also Tim Burton and
It
my
is. It
favorite
is.
Helena Bonham Carter, who I just adore.
Same.
I think she's just iconic. So very excited for that one. And then I haven't decided what's going to come after that, but like I'm determined to get caught up on at least a good chunk of the Halloween classics this year.
Yeah. So what about The Nightmare Before Christmas? Do you consider it a Christmas movie or a Halloween movie?
Oh, I'm trying to remember if I've seen it. Yeah, because right, someone I commented that and I was confused and now I realize why. Because it's like a spooky. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it works for both, but I tend to watch it at Halloween. You know.
Okay. I might add that one to the list then.
So you can do this a lot of different ways, or none of these ways. I'm I'm trying to, like, I don't think I did this the way I wanted to do it, but it's gonna work regardless. So I'm gonna.
That's pretty. I see where you're going. That's pretty.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take these and make these into.
Is it true that
a little netting here?
You keep going, and I'll start. You keep going for a bit. I'm distracted from the actual technique.
Totally fine. I'm just gonna do like a little netting. You don't have to do any of this. You can just tie that button right on there and call it a day. But you know, sometimes you gotta be a little fancy. All right, I'm gonna take the cord ends here and thread those through. Right, and then I'm just gonna tie an overhanded knot. And I'm working with really short cord now, so I got to be careful.
And do you have to leave some extra wiggle room for that button to be able to fit in, like, well, no, I guess a loop could fit over that without extra room on the other side of the button.
Yeah. Yeah. On this side with the button, I don't worry too much about the wiggle room, but now I will be worried about the wiggle room on the other end, because I want to be sure that I've got a loop that's going to accommodate the button. All right, now come on, behave. It's kind of tricky when you're working with really short cord, and I've left one out. How did you sneak out of there? Oh my gosh. Come on. I'm going to undo. Let's try that again. Maybe this time I can get them all in there.
Flyers for the win.
Yes.
That's smart.
All right. So now we've attached our button. And if you want to trim these off, you can. You can leave them. You can add little beads to them, whatever. I'm going to at least make them all pretty much the same length. Okay, so there's our button on one end. Now we have to have a loop over here on the other end. And you can kind of do the same thing if you want to do all of the little netting and whatever. It's not necessary. So basically what I like to do is I will just tie another knot. But I want to, first I have to tie it short so that I can get all of the ends through, but then I'm going to kind of pull it out so that I've got a loop. I'll show you. Like, my words are not making any sense, I realize. So see how I'm going to tie it down here a little bit further. So I didn't cinch it up next to the knot that we just did. So now I can just open this up like that and slide my button through there. It's going to be a little tight the first couple of times, but hemp has a tendency to, you know, it'll get nice and soft on you and it'll stretch. That's a little short bracelet. I just realized how short it ended up being, but yeah, so just a little.
Give it to one of your elves, Sarah.
Huh?
Just give it to one of your elves.
Exactly. It'll probably fit me. I have like the tiniest wrist ever. It's ridiculous. But
what the heck this button you're using is? I've never seen that before. What is? Yeah, is it a wood?
Yeah, it's just a wooden. Whoops. Hold on. It's just a wooden 2-hole button. I don't know what you call them, but yeah, it's just made out of wood. But you can use a regular round button. Like, part of the problem here is that I chose a button that's shaped like this. If I had used a different button, it wouldn't have been such a challenge here, but it still works out. And it's still gorgeous. I mean, please, I don't care what the clasp looks like. That's just pretty.
I'm in love. That's amazing.
Isn't that cool? All right, let me grab my box. I'm gonna show you just some other examples of stuff real quick, and then I promise I'll let you guys go.
Okay.
Fortunately, I keep everything that I've made on the loom like together. So
yeah.
So you can do fabric. Check this out. So I've done yarn, which is just, I don't know why there's a clasp attached here, but yeah. So I just made, like, you know, it's just soft, like fiber jewelry. You're totally boho, you know. No beads, just yarn on the loom. This is one of my favorites. So I used seed beads, right?
Are you freaking kidding me?
That is some Eslon, which is actually what I had the seed beads on. So it's all like one thing, but like instead of putting beads in there, I just went back and forth with just the rows so you can see just the fabric. And then I sewed on top of this, as you can see on the back, it's just plain. But in the middle, I sewed on all of these fabulous crystal yummies.
What?
Is that not awesome? And I did that on the loom.
It's like a fascinator for your wrist.
Yes. Oh yeah. So there's that. Big beads, like Sarah, really big.
The fascinator was the very first live we did together, and now it's forever.
Let's see. I'm trying to find. I thought I had a piece in here that was made with wire because I wanted to show you. Here's a good example of using different sized beads. So you can see I mixed it up. I used 2-hole checkmates, some seed beads, and some little tiny check glass rounds and some large check glass. So you literally can change it up and use different sizes beads or sized beads. They don't all have to be the same, which is super cool.
And use 2-hole beads. Pretty.
Yeah, the 2-hole beads are really fun. These spiky beads, these are 2-hole beads.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Here. So this one is made out of wire. So this is just a pendant instead of like a bracelet. It's just a pendant. You can see I did the warps with artistic wire.
Oh, wow.
And I used just my bead weaving thread. And then like down here I put this little pendant in the front, but then down here at the bottom, I just did loops so I could hang all these fun dangles from, right? So then you just put whatever stringing material off of each one of these loops and you got a really beautiful pendant. So you don't even have to make it really big.
Wow.
You know, you can make it a lot smaller if you wanted to.
That's cool.
Isn't that fun?
You know I like anything with wire, so that's
oh yeah. Yeah. And let's see if I've got one more example.
This is like Sarah going through her treasure box of inspiration.
Oh, look at this one. That's so funny. This one has flowers on it and vines. It's just another pendant. I know. I'm just such a weird. But I use 2 beads, right? So just to show, you can use like a long bugle
bead.
Yeah. And then last but not least is, look, you can do a ring. That's what I wanted to show you.
Is that the baby loom?
You can actually do this on the regular loom.
Because so for folks to know, there's two looms that Beadalon sells. They're both called the Jewel loom, but one is the baby size, right?
Yep.
And that's for what? What do you use the bead?
So the baby size one is really good for rings and pendants. It's not quite big enough to make a full size bracelet on it, but if you wanted to make, you can make things in sections, which I think a lot of people don't realize you can do. So you can make a section of something that's maybe only this big, and then attach it to something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to do things in short little sections and then connect them all together, the baby loom is perfect for that. So,
Sarah, you know, one day you might have to show us how to make that pendant, because
this one,
I love it.
Isn't that fabulous? It's so fun. It's so fun. I love using wire on the loom because that's my love language with jewelry is wire. So, and I know it is yours too. So it makes it so cool to be able to use something that most people use to make, you know, seed bead stuff with, or soft stuff with, to make something with structure like this is pretty awesome. It's pretty cool.
What does the baby loom look like?
I got one. Let me grab it for you. So the baby loom, I'm going to turn you around too, so you can see this one.
I think you're going to turn you around.
I'm going to turn me around. Not oh gosh, please don't fall. Okay, no, turn back around here.
Oh, me? Me? Okay.
So the baby loom is just a baby, right? It's just a fraction of the size of the other. So you can see like this, the size difference.
Oh, wow.
The main difference with this, other than being so small, is that it doesn't have the rod. That rod is not part of this at all. So it is permanently in this shape. So it doesn't lay flat. You don't have to deal with the rod, putting it in and taking it out. But again, it's not quite long enough to make a bracelet on, but you can do things in sections. You can do rings, you can do pendants. And it's a little bit more in it. It's not as expensive as the Jewel loom, but honestly, they're both pretty affordable. They're not expensive tools. And
so why does that one not have tension in it?
So I'm not entirely sure. You still pull the tension because you've got the buttons on the back. So you're still going to pull some tension into it. But as far as using the rod and the flexibility is just not there. And I'm not sure that I don't think I've ever had it not get as tight as the other one. I think for whatever reason, this size works that way. Peggy, I love you so much.
A baby can do anything, Peggy. Just be white.
She's too funny.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was such a cool product to see like evolve into that little masterpiece you've got there.
Yeah, isn't it pretty?
I'm like put it on my forehead.
Right? Oh yes, please. That's fabulous. Oh my gosh, yes. Take me to the Met Gala, would you please?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, with
so
that.
we should get really famous and then we'll go to the Met Gala.
Yes, let's do it.
Tell everyone that Sarah and I are really famous, and then we'll
yeah, so we can go. We have to be there.
Because
I'm gonna dress in crystal from head to toe.
We're not paying $30,000 for a ticket. That's not happening. Andrew, this is not my pool. I am at a customer and friend's house right now, very kindly, because I did not make it back to Oakland. So it's just a relaxing hour out here. Has been so lovely with you, Sarah.
It has been fun. I was really excited to do this one. So thank you for asking me to do it. I hope I have inspired people out there to try the loom. It's not hard. It's just, I know the first steps of like learning how to warp it. Once you get past that part, you're good to go. You're good to go.
This is cool. So folks, if you pick up the loom and then like come back to want to make this piece or like this technique, just go back and watch this replay. This replay is going to be on the Sam's Bead Shop YouTube channel. You can also search Sarah's. So you just search Sara Lovecraft to find Sara Lovecraft's channel. And Sara also has tutorials posted using the loom.
Mhm.
So there's just lots to check out. And I think there's a whole Jewel Loom website too.
Oh, yeah.
Beadalon should be sponsoring us right now. So check this out and use your Sam's Beads and share what you make with us in Gem
Yes.
Chat, in Sarah's group, because we want to see. And everyone have just like an awesome weekend. I just really go relax, go take time for yourself and bead. Like, you deserve it. So Sara, you need to go stop beading. Because I've been working too hard this week. So, thank you so much, Sara. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was so fun.
And I wish everyone a beautiful weekend. Bye,
Yeah.
Sara, and bye, everyone.
Bye.